Okay, while a couple of other folks trickle in, I'm going to kick this off. So first of all, hi everyone, and thank you for attending this month's webcast, Predicting Success in Jobs and Career Paths, Potential versus Fit. Tonight will be a 45-minute presentation. We'll save 15 minutes for questions and answers at the end. And then the presentation will be followed by an hour of networking via Zoom breakout rooms. You're welcome to stick around, network with your peers and colleagues. I will ask that you hold all questions till the end. Feel free to shoot some questions via chat, and I'll make sure that I am corralling all of them and prioritizing those as we get to the question and answer. Today's webcast will be presented to you by three very esteemed individuals in the field. Dr. Scott Davies, CEO at Point Leader Predictive Analytics, Inc. He earned his PhD in IO psychology from The Ohio State University. Dr. James Austin, Technical Board Chairperson at Point Leader Predictive Analytics and Senior Research Specialist at The Ohio State University, who earned his PhD from Virginia Tech. And Dr. Michael Zickar, Technical Board Member at Point Leader Predictive Analytics and Professor at Bowling Green State University, earned his PhD from the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. Thank you all for coming and presenting today. Dr. Davies, I will pass the ball over to you.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you all for inviting us to present. As Mike said, we're going to talk about predicting potential and predicting job fit. Those are quite different concepts, complementary but different, and we're quite interested in talking about that to you today. Again, I have colleagues Dr. Austin and Dr. Zickar with me today. We have an opportunity for change right now. One of the main reasons that we wanted to talk to you about this is the difference between fit and potential has a big impact on ethnicity and gender. Due to how things happened in 2020 with the pandemic, social unrest, economic uncertainty, this is an opportunity for all of us in IO psychology to have a big impact on how things go in the future. And I think that we all believe that we can make a difference in diversity, we can make a difference in communities, we can make a difference for businesses and individuals. And it's been at times like this throughout history that IO psychologists have made a big difference. World War I, World War II, those were big opportunities for IO psychologists to have an impact on not just the research of our field, but the work for everyone. And I think that we should look at this again as that kind of an opportunity. And it's interesting that my work with personality and a lot of the roots for what we do now came from work that I did with Bob and Joyce Hogan after the attacks on 9/11 and the creation of the Department of Homeland Security. And we selected all of those TSA security screener agents and assessed them with the Hogan assessments, which allowed us to better identify what worked and what didn't work in personality assessment, what it took to put a personality assessment on a 3-parameter IRT platform, create multiple forms, and to improve item quality. Fairness is the key to person, business, and community success. I firmly believe that. And that applicants are diverse, customers are diverse, bias is the key to failure, fairness is the key to success. I believe that it's that simple, that today we cannot continue to ignore these factors, that not only is it the right thing to do, it's an imperative for business as well. Businesses that ignore these factors, I believe, are going to fail. They're not going to be able to continue on in business if they do not recognize that their communities that they are serving are more diverse than they have been in the past, and that they need to treat applicants differently, employees differently, and better understand what it is that causes bias in our systems. And it's a fairly fundamental problem, but it's been ongoing for years, as I think that we can all admit that there's historically biased measures of what matters. And if you look back all the way to Münsterberg in 1912, he said that the things that we need to focus on are jobs, people, and performance. And that has not changed. When we built the Point Leader business, we asked stakeholders to tell us what mattered in talent management, and they said the same things. We want to be able to describe our jobs in ways that people understand what it is they're supposed to do. We want to be able to select people fairly and validly that can do those jobs, have high potential for that. And we want to be able to direct their job performance. So that's the same thing Münsterberg told us over 100 years ago. And so it's a fairly simple equation. It is just that we still don't do it as well as we should. I mean, sometimes we do it better than others, but if you think about the job analyses that we have in place, the predictors we have in place, and the job performance measures we have in place, most of them are biased. I just, it's sad but true. And it's going to take a lot of work to fix that, but IO psychologists are the ones who can do that. And we have disregard for diversity at critical points in our predictive models. And some of this is because there is not a diversity of stakeholders in an organization that makes it easier rather than more difficult for us to address some of these issues. But that's not an excuse for us to not fix the problems, right? We really need to look at predictors, performance behaviors, the goals for business strategies. Well, what are the valued outcomes for business, and help organizations understand that diversity, as Jim and I were talking the other day, it can't be the icing on a cake. It has to be baked into the cake. It cannot just be addressed at the top level by hiring a diversity officer and saying, okay, we've addressed diversity now. That's not where the problems lie. The problems lie throughout the organization in the models and measures and metrics that we use. And it's going to take a lot of work, but that's okay. It's the kind of work that we do, that we're really good at. And we're here today to talk a little bit about some of the things that we've learned and found. And Jim is going to set that in a theoretical background for us. And Mike's going to talk about the measurement issues around, having unbiased, reliable, valid models. It requires good psychometrics, good predictive modeling. And then I'm going to show you some examples of what we've done over the past 12 years with the work we've done at Point Leader. So I'll turn it over to Jim.
Scott, thank you. I am going to touch on several topics. To the left, you see a structural equation model that Scott has fit for some of the predictors, and then intermediate components as well as outcomes with some additional data on cost savings per month from applying these procedures. I'd like to talk a little about bandwidth versus fidelity, synthetic validity, the PPA system and its data yield, and some directions. This is probably going to shade over into Mike and Scott's part as well. Can you switch the slide, Scott? Here, some of the background topography that we've identified with a quote from Helen Keller about working together. There's a major second edition by Farr and Tippins that documents a lot of the progress in employee selection in our subfield, which is a heterogeneous community of researchers and practitioners. You also see the release of the latest joint standards from AERA, APA, and National Council on Measurement and Education, and the SIOP principles that were revised after that release. There is a lot more attention to fairness and bias across different sectors of testing outside of selection as well, educational, certification, etc. Then we've seen over the last few years the rise of artificial intelligence centric approaches, not only for selection, but across society. And this has led to reactions from many quarters. There's a working paper by Tippins, Oswald, and McPhail that is on ResearchGate. We feel that an online system like Point Leader for measuring potential and fit makes possible some comparisons of broader and narrower measures. So within the system, we can address this bandwidth and fidelity. Do you go broad or do you go deep? Could you switch the slide, Scott, please? So Cronbach and Glaser identified this bandwidth fidelity dilemma or issue from their literature review of information and decision theory applied to selection, placement, and classification by tests. That was the book that highlighted the institutional and individual perspectives. And I believe that with Point Leader, you can incorporate both of those perspectives, the organization and the individual. Then moving about 40 years into the future, Denise Owens and Vish translated that issue to personality measures used in selection. I believe that Cronbach was trying to look at the progress since World War II, and there was a lot of emphasis on ability measurement. So bringing it over to personality, they argued that broader is better. I think that that yields moderate validities and Murphy's inevitable trade-off. Much more recently, Salgado extended the bandwidth fidelity issue that had been raised before by noting that maximum validity for narrower criteria is achievable with higher fidelity measures. So we want to show how a single system, Point Leader, predictive assessment, and its affiliated tools can estimate potential scores on competencies using configural scores across multiple scale metrics. Next slide, sir. So potential and fit, how do they fit together? Predicting job fit, we use a set of competency level dimensions, job attitudes and outcomes with job potential assessments. The fact that this is a single system and you can compare the broader and narrower measures is a benefit. And our assertion is that narrower constructs are better for predicting fit and broader constructs better for measuring potential. How does that fit in with the criteria? We believe that fit predicts more proximal criteria, immediate fit to job components. Also of great interest to me is how this discussion helps with the criterion problem, which is the predictor and which is the criterion or criteria. And how do job fit and job potential slot into our scientific research? And we have one of the classic validity of personnel decisions shown here, Binion and Barrett, where we have measures and constructs. And that's what PPA is continuing to research. So where do we start? What we've learned, as I said before, the broader constructs predict more distal criteria further along. So potential for success in a career path, changes in career. The fit indices derived from AI solutions tend to use narrower constructs, such as high school attended biodata, with decreasing predictive validity over time in our experience. The potential indices that are derived from psychometric solutions tend to use broader constructs with increasing predictive validity over time. The quality of an implemented solution that Point Leader can bring to an organization measured by validity, utility, and ROI. And I do believe it's being recorded in response to the chat. Let's see. So the implemented solution, we measure validity, utility, and ROI contingent on the quality of the job analysis. So start with critical competencies for success in the job, move to predictors, performance behaviors and critical job competencies, with goals aligned to business strategies developed by the organization with input from point leader to achieve those valued outcomes. Also program evaluation, trying things out and changing them when they don't work, or adding incremental competencies and predictors. And that, we believe, ends up with valued outcomes for business, financial outcomes, market share, environmental impact. Next slide, sir.
Okay, I think, Mike, thank you, Jim.
I'll keep it short. It's Scott's going to have the bulk of the results, but excited to talk a little bit about some of the psychometric backbone for the work that we do. And we were talking beforehand. We were prepping this talk earlier today and talking about how we're consider ourselves sort of psychometric curmudgeons, or really old school psychometricians, in that there's always a push for the new bells and whistles. And I feel like with a lot of the recent testing work that's been done, there's a real dismissal of some of the basics. And so it's good to hear my former, I had an undergraduate class with Jim Austin, and he was talking about Cronbach and all of that back then. And these concepts that were talked about in the 50s are things that we really take to heart here. So four issues in terms of keys to success for the instruments. One is item quality. So, I really get a sense of, with a lot of the contemporary psychometrics, it's really like the items are totally ignored, with just a focus on an overall scale score and maybe a reporting of an internal consistency statistic or something like that. And there's a lot of care put into our measure with item quality, and really studying and trying to package together these different items. And I think it's something that people in the skills testing and ability testing may have spent more attention with, but in the non-cognitive ability realm, I feel like there's really less attention paid to that. We often don't even have really good content domain specs for the constructs we're measuring, and so it's hard to judge quality. A big focus on scoring as well, and some neat sort of graphs in terms of looking at how different scoring techniques can make a difference. And then sort of complementing, but certainly very different from item quality as well, is scale quality. When we're talking about measuring for fit, we want to really make sure that the items, although all high quality, may not work together in a scale that's going to fit for the needs of that particular selection assessment. And so really trying to pick the best quality of items too in a systematic way, without going full computer adaptive, is a key thing here as well. And then with that scale quality is alignment too. So aligning the measure to the particular goals of the assessment. Okay, next slide, Scott. Just a little bit of, so we're not totally old school, and that certainly use a lot of the insights and analysis techniques from item response theory and beyond. And the instrument that Scott uses is dichotomously scored, so agreed and disagree, I believe. And the 3PL model is one that is really the foundation of all of the measures that we use. And I could go through some of these item characteristic curves here. It might not be a fruitful use of all of our time, but what we look at really is not only how discriminating the item is, but also where on the underlying trait dimension it's discriminating. And then also we find that the C parameter is really useful for personality items as well, and is a good index often of quality as well, that when people can't understand items, when there's a lot of ambiguity in the language, and also sometimes when items may be too overly transparent, the C parameter is going to fluctuate highly. Okay, next slide, Scott. And this is a neat little slide here. Just looking at, so the choice of the scoring model is critical for the utility of the system. So higher quality items give more choices in the scoring model. And here's just a slide of the agreeableness measure from the instrument scored with just number correct versus using the theta distribution using IRT scoring. And you can see a difference how that theta distribution is really much more normally distributed, and number correct is going to be just definitely a skewed distribution. Okay, next slide. So in terms of linking it to data, when talking about item quality and scoring model, here's a comparison of one particular unnamed but popular personality inventory data for 2,000 job applicants. And you can see that the distribution is really skewed there, whereas that real focus on building, having a basis of high quality items that are used to aggregate to high quality scales can make a difference. And we should also have talked about a high quality pool as well. So have of items to choose from can make it so that you're going to have a much more normally distributed scale that is going to allow you to do, to make better decisions. Next slide, Scott. And then here's just an alignment. You may have good items that are mismatched to the particular target of interest. So we're all keenly sensitive to this when we're talking about knowledge and ability items, that you certainly wouldn't want to give algebra items to a real young population. That wouldn't be a good assessment here. In terms of a non-cognitive assessment though, and personality, really picking and choosing items and matching the difficulty or the level of challengingness of items is also going to be useful as well. And so here's just a graph where on the far right is a perfectly aligned instrument that the difficulty of the items matches the sample population, and the other graphs show some mismatch there. And I think, Scott, you're taking it over from here.
Yes, thank you, Mike. And I might just add, thanks for going through that. And this has worked, I believe, as efficiently for us as using computer adaptive testing. I mean, it's adaptive to the population rather than the individual. And I don't know, you guys, Arentz Lange is another graduate from Illinois, who did a lot of work with computer adaptive testing and educational measurement. I worked with him for a while at Pearson, and he found that this approach worked really better if you look at it from an efficiency perspective of matching the item pool to the population, the target population, rather than trying to match the string of items to the individual. Because then everyone got the same set of items within an applicant pool or whatever the target pool was. And so you didn't have to explain to people why Jimmy got these items and Julie got those items or whatever, right? Try to defend that, the different items, and explain the IRT scoring and all of that. And that it does, we found that it works really well with personality testing, as long as you've got really good items, they're on a 3PL model and you understand what's going on with them, is that if you match the distribution of the personality item difficulties to the theta distribution of the population, then just matching that, it kind of makes sense, right? This is what we're after. We try to achieve this one at a time with computer adaptive testing. And if you look at the distribution of the items that are distributed and their scores in the population, you would see the same thing. And we're just addressing it more quickly in the system, right? So let's match that up first and then get everyone, basically the same set of items, and it works out. So I just wanted to add that in. So what does all this mean? And what about job fit and job potential? That's what we're here to talk about. And the thing that I've seen, this is an example of one of our models, that what we do model-based talent management. We start out with a model because from our synthetic validity, the work that I did with Joyce Hogan years ago was that we know enough about this to be able to say, based upon synthetic validity, and if you have a good competency model where you can align jobs so that you know something about them, then you should be able to predict, right, estimate, hypothesize what it is that's going to predict the outcomes. So what we do is we go into an organization and we ask them, what are the outcomes of interest? We do the job analysis. We identify what are the values of those outcomes for high versus low performing individuals. We do the job analysis and identify the competencies. We take it to the step of, well, you told us safety is important. From the job analysis, we found that dependability and trustworthiness are two critical competencies for the job, and align this stuff for us, right? Help us through this process of saying, if dependability is a critical competency for the job, then which one of these outcomes that you're interested in does it align to? And that's what we do. We build the model from this end, from the here back, right? From the values, the business outcomes, the performance behaviors, the competencies, and all the way back. And then we turn it around when we're doing the testing and say, these are the 10 critical competencies that are important for the job. Those are the ones upon which we should predict potential. And that's different than just predicting fit. We've done jobs in which we have predicted fit, where we've gone in and we've assessed a group of individuals who are high performing, and we looked at their personality results, and the people would say, we want a set of people that look just like these based upon their personality scales. And it's very short-lived validity, right? That they're sure, they look just like the other people that you have, but it is not a good long-term outcome. Whereas this process that we have is much more forward thinking. It's more fair. It allows you to take more of a look at, okay, so if these are critical competencies, and based upon the literature and our research, openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, sensibility, leadership, derailment, strategic intelligence, tactical intelligence, emotional intelligence, how much do each of those, what's the relationship of each of those for predicting dependability, predicting trustworthiness, predicting teamwork? And we know what those are, and we know the relationships that those should have with performance on the job, the performance behaviors. So we give the people that we have hired, when we do a validation study, we do it beforehand. After a validation study, when we have actual applicants on the job, we give them our performance measure to find out, are they using the behaviors? Are they acting as we would expect them to act given their potential on the job? And it also helps them with understanding, it directs their behaviors, right? So we're giving them a leg up. We're saying you have high potential to succeed on dependability. You have the personality profile, ability profile that it takes to perform well based on our research. Now, this is how you should act on the job. These are the behaviors that are expected related to dependability. They're key behavior indicators. And then the relationships between those and the business outcomes come back from the client, right, from the business. So, and then where we were talking about aligning the personality scales to the target population, that happens pretty quickly. And we use machine learning for that. We learn about the applicant population as quickly as possible and make whatever adjustments are necessary to align the distribution of each of these personality and ability scales to the target population of applicants. And then on this end, we are looking at their outcome data as soon as it comes back to us and aligning that on the back end, again, with machine learning to say, okay, this person has what it takes to be dependable. They are behaving as they should. And these are the relationships that we have found in the past that to have to do with safety outcomes, right? Accidents, workman's comp, those kinds of things. There are those key behaviors, are those key outcomes that the business provides to us. So we know we're looking for a relationship of 0.5 or thereabout, 0.45 to 0.55. We should see that. If we're not, then we're looking at making certain we're aligned, right? Are they talking about lower levels of safety, higher levels of safety? What is it about? Is there something about management or training? Well, what's going on with the system that we're not seeing what we should be? So it's very much a hypothesis testing approach for potential. And it's a much more fair and unbiased approach than just using straight up job fit, that we're going to hire people who fit, right? Now, fit works well in the short term, but not as well in long term. Here's what we built to do this with. Again, we talked to stakeholders before we built this model, and they said that we needed to describe the jobs. That's our focus assessment. What do people in the job tend to focus on in the job? And that's how we align a job to our competency model. The potential assessment is what we use to measure the people in the job. As I said, it measures the big 5 plus drive, leadership, competition, and derailment, strategic intelligence, tactical intelligence, and emotional intelligence. That's our assessment. And then the behavioral assessment fits in between them, right? So you've got the job, you've got the people. Let's make certain that they understand what it is that they're supposed to do. And it gives us some early indications of, is our system working right? Are the people that we expect to do well on the job, are they behaving as we would expect them to? And is that distribution matching what we would expect given what their scores were on the potential assessment? And then to make it all work well and to be able to make it user-friendly and provide feedback and whatnot, we have our analytics and business intelligence reporting systems where we are constantly giving data to the company and the company is constantly giving data back. And that is how we tweak things, right? Constant, continuous improvement. And then a learning community. I've never thought that it would spare to tell someone that they have high potential for a job, they got the right personality, they're not performing as they should, and then not have anything to tell them what to do, right? That they really do need that. That's not fair. So we have competency aligned classes that people can use that, and they don't have to be very sophisticated. And a lot of times just make certain that the person understands. And again, this is in the name of long-term validity, right? What the idea here is that you hire for diversity, which means some of the folks may never have had any experience with some of these things. Maybe from the community that they've grown up in, they don't even know anyone who has been in this job before. They've not witnessed it. They haven't heard about it. Well, then it becomes even more important that you are helping them with the behaviors that are critical to the job. You don't just assume that they know what to do when they're on the job, and that you make it easy for them to learn, right? So we use a hybrid learning model of mentors, videos, written material, just to help them along. And it's a model that's all competency aligned. In Hogan, Davies and Hogan 2007, we published a book chapter about a competency model that we worked on for 2 years there. A lot of work to identify 40 competencies that were sufficient for describing the likenesses and differences in all of the jobs that are included in ONET. So across 1,500 jobs. So for any one of them, the 10 competencies that are most critical for that job, that's not a perfect definition of the job, but it is good enough to tell one job from another and to identify who is going to have the best, highest potential for that job, right? Here's one of our examples for customer service reps. We do a lot of work all the way across an organization, but I in particular like to work with what I call the base of the pyramid. If the base of the pyramid is falling apart, I don't care who's at the top of it, they're going to fail. That's just the way that it is. The base of the pyramid cannot be eroding with people coming and going and not knowing what to do and all of that. So we do a lot of entry-level selection work with our system. It's also the point at which we can have the biggest impact on fairness, right? Get the people into the organization at the base, move them up through the organization, and it will change the organization. It will become more diverse. It will become more fair. The outcomes will become better. And in this case, we were looking, they had a huge problem, as you can tell, with turnover. It was a call center customer service rep job. And these are monthly turnover numbers, 40%, 43%, 39%, right? And the attrition the year prior to implementation, you can see here, it was 40% in, I suppose it was January. And of those that we assessed, so we assessed them, they hired those who were high potential for the job. They interviewed them using our competency aligned interview questions to take some of the variance out of the interview outcomes. They gave them performance advice when they were onboarded. Look, turnover dropped to 18%. That's huge. That was huge. And then you can see this month to month. The year before it was 41%, and there wasn't anything that changed in the environments. In the sites where they were not using us, they maintained these numbers or higher than they were this year that we used for comparison. But as you can tell, we had an average of 30% difference between month to month of how many people left. That's potential, right? Leaving a job after a month, 2 months, 3 months, that's a fairly complex behavior to predict. You can tell the attrition was predicted by 3 competencies. That's potential, right? That those who were higher on concern for others, teamwork, and stress tolerance exhibited lower turnover rates. We predicted that those with our personality scales that would have more concern for others, these came from the job analysis, that they were better at teamwork and they had more potential for stress tolerance, would have higher potential in that job. And they did. And they did. They stayed much longer. Now, fit. We're talking about fit. The personal characteristics, as I call them, in this case, agreeableness and sensibility, they acted almost immediately. That if you talk about fitting in, a lot of times you can find that out from your interviewers. Who are the interviewers looking for? Interviewers are typically looking for fit, not potential, right? They are looking for someone who's going to fit in, go to work, get it done right then. And they were looking at people who were nice and laid back. Nice and laid back didn't do it. Not nice and laid back got them through the interview, but nice and laid back did not make them good call center representatives. They couldn't sell. They couldn't get through training. They were just nice and laid back. That's what they were. So here's a difference where you can see we were able to measure both, predict both, but potential was much more important than was fit. And you could also see it in the outcomes of these, that we increased diversity in these organizations by at least 20%. And that was based on potential. If you looked at what was coming out of the interviewers, just based on fit, if we would have used their recommendations alone and not potential, diversity would not have increased. It would have stayed the same. They were looking for people to fit in. This is a good comparison of measuring potential versus measuring fit. They both have a place, but you just have to be really careful. If you're looking to hire a lawnmower person, then fit might be okay. If you're looking to hire someone long-term to be a leader or stick with you a long time and the job is more complex, then potential definitely is of higher value than fit. In fact, fit can get you in trouble. Manufacturing production workers over time. This was over a 5-year period. The amount of money that it saved the organization by having us come in and measure the potential of employees. So we were looking for those with a low probability to engage in risky behaviors. And that had to do with a whole constellation of things, right? They had to be willing to listen, take part in the training, safety training. They had to follow the rules. They had to, there was a lot that went into this to keep people from violating the safety rules, not getting in accidents and all those kinds of things. But the payoff was big for the organization, but they had to take a long look at that. And in this case, fitting in would have been a bad thing because they had really high accident rates in these manufacturing plants, and to fit in would have been bad. So that's why they called us in to look at how can we predict potential, right? The probability that these folks will not, and they didn't really have anyone to compare them to. I mean, we couldn't very well assess the people who were there and say we want more people like this because all of them were getting hurt. So our model was critical for this study and other studies like this in order to predict with, based upon synthetic validity estimates, our research archives, what we knew about the job, what we knew about predicting risky behaviors, safe behaviors, and then put all of that into place, get the data back from them as we go. We always start out in a good spot, right? But then we learn from the data as we get it in to make certain that we're optimizing those outcomes. Leadership studies, I think that they are probably the place where all of us are most used to talking about potential. Sometimes we hire leaders for fit, right? We want a leader that's going to fit on a team, but it's a fairly short-sighted approach. It's a good way to inhibit diversity. There's just a lot of baggage that can come along with fit. And if you look at a team, if you look at a business's strategic plans and you look at what it is they're expected to do, then you can look at potential and you can do a much better job of predicting what's going to happen over time. And as you can see in the slide, the payback was increasing, right? That's the thing about measuring potential, is that the validity the return on investment increases over time because they make more good decisions than bad decisions, more good behaviors than bad behaviors. And over time that stacks up. I talk a little bit about who we are. I didn't want this to be, salesy or marketing, but since we have the opportunity to tell you who we are, I'd like to. We've assessed over 3 million applicants over the last 12 years and 1,500 job roles for over 500 clients. We've been around, we've been doing a lot. We're kind of quiet, but we do a lot of research. We're competency aligned, research based. And I think that we are at least as fair and valid as any of the competition that's out there. Because that's our mission. That's what we focus on. We've assessed over 13,000 leaders in the past 8 years. We have a blended learning system. Our technology is a secure system with 99% uptime. We can integrate with any popular systems. We're right now implementing globally on the Microsoft Azure platform, because that helps us a lot with data issues in the EU and elsewhere that, Azure takes care of that for us. So we've got a big update going on in that regard. Widespread effectiveness. I did this purposefully. I did not choose an industry and say we're going to work there. And that's why it's maybe taken us longer to get to where we are, is because, in my opinion, this should work anywhere, right? If it doesn't work anywhere, then it doesn't work. Because what we're talking about are human things in jobs, and the system has been used in every segment of the workforce in every marketing. We were founded in 2012. We're family owned. We now have 60 staff across US, Europe, and Asia. We have a baseline of, for every dollar a client spends, that we're going to return them at least 10, although most of the time it's more like for every dollar they get back 50. But for every dollar they spend, they should at least get back 10. It should be at least a multiplier of 10. And our fairness and accuracy is what differentiates us from everyone else. And that's what we have. So I look forward to your questions and comments, and I'm hoping that there was something here that helps someone.
Thanks so much, guys. That was fantastic. There are a couple of questions in the chat that I will raise to the forefront, and then I will let anyone else who has a question ask that as well. The first one that's popping up looks like from Bill Farmer. How are you operationalizing diversity?
We look at the baseline. I can take that. So we look at the baseline of, well, I guess first, actually it's by the client, right? So we look at it by race, we look at it by gender, we look at it by age, we look at it by mental disability. I did a lot of work with the, I don't know if Jim remembers this, the severely mentally disabled population of Franklin County, Ohio. We applied the job characteristics model to them. And this has been, what, 20 years ago. And we did a lot of work, and we have done a lot of work with mentally disabled populations. And with, we look at it in every way that it makes any sense to. So who all is in the workforce, who all could be in the workforce, and what are the opportunities to make that workforce more diverse? Does that answer the question? I mean, it's a very practical approach. We don't have any strict guidelines. So Jim, you want to add on to that? We worked on.
I know. I was just saying thumbs up because Bill had commented in the chat. It looks like there are two other questions. One from Martha. What was the career path? Did the customer service reps progress into higher level in the organization?
We identified 3 career paths. One of them was to become to stay in the customer service realm and operations technology and then into corporate were the three career paths that they were identified to go into. And in the corporate path, it included HR and training.
One other question, Scott, from Manjiri. Who are your stakeholders that you've mentioned several times?
So when we built the system, we surveyed human resource professionals, executives, including CEOs, CFOs, chief learning officers, chief scientists, IO psychologists, employees, career seekers. What do you hope to gain from you apply for a job, you take an assessment. What would you hope to get from that? What would you hope to get from your employer regarding performance measurement?
Very good. Thank you. Everyone else, if there are any other outstanding questions, please do feel free to ask them now. Yes, so there will be a copy of the slides, and the recording will be posted to the PTCMW website by tomorrow end of day. Thanks for that question, Michelle.
We have our technical manual for Point Leader that has more detailed information about what we do in it. That if you'd like a copy of it, just contact us and we can certainly get that to you.
Hey, Scott, there was another question that popped up in the chat from Bharati. Could you please talk a little about the process of building the predictive model you showed us? As in, how did you decide which predictors would be included in the model, lit reviews, stakeholders?
So we looked at the existing literature on, I think we went back at least World War II, and looked at what the predictors were of the competencies. So I suppose that we had at that point decided that we were going to use the 40 competencies. We had to start somewhere. And I believe that the work that we had done, that I'd done with Bob and Joyce, was sufficient to decide that those 40 competencies were enough for us to use to describe all the jobs. So then it was a matter of identifying what did the preponderance of evidence show predicted performance on each of the 40 competencies. And we started reviewing all of that and archiving it. And I think you were in on some of that, Jim. We had a lot of people looking at what it was, and we've archived all of that to say, so what predicted performance on, and from that, we identified that we have to have the big five. And the sixth factor, drive, ambition, humility from Hexaco. I like the Hexaco model. Humility, it's a sub-factor of extroversion. It is necessary. You cannot predict leadership or sales without having that. And then there needed to be strategic intelligence and tactical intelligence. That ability does matter. We use it as a step function. And that's how we maintain fairness, is that you have to have a minimal amount of ability in order to be trained, in order to perform in some of the competencies, math skills, continuous learning, training, teaching others. They require some amount of cognitive ability. And we measure that with spatial, verbal, and quantitative item content, keep it as fair as possible, keep the step as low as possible. And then derailment. I found in my work that there were two factors of derailment that predicted performance, and they were explosiveness and isolation. that the rest of it didn't matter a lot for most jobs, but you can't throw things and you can't go hide when you're under pressure. Those are bad, right? They definitely have an impact on performance. So we included a scale of derailment and a scale of emotional intelligence. And we found that that was sufficient, right? If we had, there are practical constraints around users that we have to be able to get people to take the assessment. So we can't ask them about everything on earth. There are other constructs that we might want to include, but what do we have to have was we were looking for that lower threshold, I guess, of what do we need to predict performance in any job in the US economy if we have it defined by these 40 competencies. And that's how we came up with the predictors that we had, was based upon a preponderance of evidence. And then we started testing it. And for the last, we're still doing that. But for the first 7 years we were in business, that's all we did was validation study after validation study after validation study to make certain we would hypothesize that for these 10 competencies, these are the predictors. And then we would see, well, are we right or wrong, right? Do we agree? Did we find something different than what the evidence from the research says or not? And it was just continuous hypothesis testing with new groups and new jobs, new situations.
Hey, Scott, I don't want to cut in on Mike. There are two more questions. One's from Martha. Can you talk a little more about the performance measures that were combined with your assessment? Were those 9-box type talent reviews?
No, we use, it's a very simple, like almost like a bars scale, that for each of the competencies, they're competency based. And for each competency, we have 5 behavioral indicators that we have scaled from easy to difficult, right? And then we have those now at 4 different levels in the organization. Our career pathing model includes 8 industries, or the columns, with 4 levels: entry, professional, management, and leadership as the levels. And some behaviors transfer well across levels and across industries, others not so much. So we have a bank of these performance items that we use, and they're scored 1 to 5. Do you do it not at all, or do you do it all of the time? So then for a 5-item, 5-point scale, you can get a score of anywhere from 0 to 25 on each competency regarding the person's behavior. And then we use that as a 360. We give it to the individual to rate their own performance for self-evaluation, self-reflection. We ask the organization not to use that for administrative purposes, because then that kind of ruins it for research. And we also use it if there are others who have the opportunity to observe, the supervisor, peers, team members, self-reports, whatever, then we ask them to fill it out as well.
Sorry, one more from Steve Russell. Distinction between fit and potential. When you work with job subject matter experts, do you discuss this distinction? And Steve thought that it seems that current SMEs would be best suited to comment on fit more than potential.
That's right. Been doing this right now with a group who believed that they wanted more recruiters, just like the recruiters that they have. And we went to their strategic plan. We talked about what they hope to accomplish. This senior leadership that I'm having this conversation with. And, do you want things to stay as they are? Do you want the same business outcomes next year as you have this year? Do you want growth? I see growth in your strategic plan. How do you plan on getting there, right? Are you going to have people do different things than they did this year and last year? And then that conversation is where you get current leadership, and then you work down into the SMEs. Although a lot of times the SMEs realize that we should be doing different things to move forward than what we're doing right now. That they often know, because they're doing the job, that if you really want us to succeed, we should be focusing on X, Y, and Z instead of what we're focusing on. So it's usually not that difficult to get them to realize what it is they should be focusing on. But that's the conversation that we have. There were some, those articles from a few years back on forward focused job analysis. That's some good stuff for this conversation, right? The forward focused job analysis for future focus. That was a future focused job analysis. We did that for the TSA employees. There were no TSA employees, right? There was no security screener. We had to do a future focused job analysis with Liz Kolmstetter and those folks in DC to decide, what is it that you want this person to do? How do you envision them doing it, right? What are the outcomes? How do you expect them to get there?
Okay, we've got time. Looks like one more question came in, and then we'll break out into the networking portion of this event. Looks like, could you share any resources that discuss the IRT approach that you used? Very interesting.
There's quite a bit about it in our technical manual. It's a lengthy technical manual, and we get into a lot of the details about our IRT approach there. And if you want more, just set up a meeting with us and be glad to discuss.
I can't remember that report. Does it have good citations, reference list in there too?
There are.
Yeah, good.
All right, very good. For those of us that are going to stick around for the networking session, we'll do this the way we've done this in the past, which is we'll leverage the Zoom breakout functionality. I'm in the process of doing that now. I'm first going to stop the recording.